Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Mrs. KK and this is The Wave. It is your weekly show that looks at topics related to personal, family and business finance. And all we are hoping is that by the time you get to the end of these conversations, you are better equipped to make sound financial decisions. So if you're new here, thank you very much for stopping by. And if you're already a returning subscriber, an awesome appreciation. So this is one of many series I'll be doing in my attempt to get back to content creation. But until I sort out my filming space, I will only be doing this sort of short form content. So this one is things I would do differently if I was house hunting in 2024. I've bought a property before and I've shared my journey, especially the mistakes that I've made along that journey. So I'll link that video up in case you didn't watch it because it's actually from a few years back now. But if I was house hunting in 2024, this is the 3 things I would do. Number 1, I would compute my own pre-qualification amount before I approach any financial institution. The problem with this is that most people, the starting point when they are looking for houses, they go to the bank, get a pre-approval, and that informs them how much money they qualify for. And the issue that I've noticed is that the moment the bank tells you qualify for X amount of money, you are all of a sudden fixated on looking at properties that are just within that range. You are not flexible to look any lower, you're not flexible to look any higher. So having your own qualification amount opens you up to looking at what's actually on the market below and above that range. What I would do, instead of computing, this is how much I would qualify for, I would compute how much am I comfortably be able to afford in my monthly budget. So a rule of thumb is if interest rates are 10%, a 1 million property would cost you around about 10,000, right? But the moment the interest rate is above 10%, which is the environment that we are currently in, you might want to add 1,000 on top of that. So if the property is 850,000, your installment would have been about 8.5, but because we are in high interest rate times, we are looking at about 9.5 to 10. So you can always add 1,000 on top of that price if you are trying to work out roughly how much that property is going to cost. So put differently, if your property is 1.2 million, if interest rate were about 10%, you would have been paying around about 12,000, but now interest rate is above 10%. So if you put in a 12, you might want to add 1,000 or 1,500 to gauge where you will be. Then you take that number that you've just computed and realistically see if it's going to fit in your budget. And on top of that, I would almost add a 3,000 buffer on my amount, depending of course on your qualification amount. That 3,000 buffer would just cater for your rates and taxes, your water, your municipal bills, your maintenance and your insurance and all of those other costs that comes with owning a house. Remember, owning a house isn't just the bond at the bank. It's the bond at the bank, it's the maintenance of that house, and it's also the insurance that comes with that house. And something that also people don't understand is the qualification amount is only as good as the information you feed the bank. If you withhold certain information and it's not evident in your bank statement, the bank wants to know and they will evaluate you at a higher price. But when the installment comes and hit your bank account, it will hit it meeting other expenses that you hit from the bank. So it's very important that you do this honest assessment before you approach any banking institution. Number 2, I would do differently is I will mimic owning this house for at least 3 to 6 months before I commit. Look, a house is a long-term commitment, so there's no point into rushing it. This whole notion of you wake up tomorrow, you want the property, and whatever the first thing you see you buy isn't going to cut it, because if you do make a mistake, this is a long-term commitment. So what I would say is the number I computed in my first point, whether that works out to be 12,000 or it works out to be 15,000, I will commit to saving that for at least 3 to 6 months so that I can see whether I'm able to breathe and actually coexist with this installment that is going to be going on my bank account. And if you build up a saving in the process of you trying to mimic this, you can then use that towards paying your lawyer's fees. You can use it towards paying your bank admin fees. You can use it towards paying for a few things to make your place looks nice when you move in. So it actually helps you to build discipline and to sort of see if you can afford really before you do the actual commitment. And lastly, I would really give it a serious thought whether this property that I'm currently buying is going to be my residential property or is going to be my investment property. This is very, very important because there's a lot of people that bought properties when they were single, and then when they got married, they are realizing the property is not practical to raise kids in, the property is not ideal in terms of school location, the property is not ideal in terms of where they want to live, and they want to exit. And you don't always exit when the time is favorable because you're almost selling under for sale. You're not really exiting, with time, and that you don't want to do. So you must be comfortable whether you are buying it for residential purposes or you are buying it for investment purposes. If you are buying it for residential purposes, you must be comfortable to say, if my life were to change today, if I were to bring in kids in here, if I were to bring in a husband here, if I were to bring in a wife here, will we still be comfortable to live in this house? Or if you are buying it for rental purposes, is if someone was renting, if you were looking at this property as a potential tenant, would you rent this property? I made a reel a couple of months ago where I said, landlords that are building 19 kururu cupboards, kitchen status and expecting to be paid 2024 rental prices isn't going to cut it. So you must look at what type of kitchen would you like to find into a rental place. Would you like to find a built-in cupboard? Would you like to find in a built-in stove? Would you like to find in an aircon? And those are the things that you should consider so that you can see that if this property is actually fit for rental purposes. And also be comfortable in which target market will your tenants be. Are you going to be looking at the high-end market or are you going to be looking at the low-end market? It's very funny that, when I was looking at a property, all I wanted was a bigger area so that I can build backyard flats. Because at that point in time, I was looking at the potential income that I could get from the backyard flats. But now when I'm like all grown up with a family and kids, I'm like, when I'm looking for a property now, I don't want to rent a house that has a backyard flats because I'm thinking, where will my kids play? Will they annoy the tenants? So it's those things that if your target markets are going to be family, chances are that people don't want to rent places where there's backyard flats because then their kids are free. But if your target markets are single, perhaps they won't mind renting, a place where there's a backyard flat because in any case, all people that are living on the property are single parents or single people and they don't have kids to bother them. And it's also funny, the complex that I went to view earlier this year when we were looking for a property to rent in Windhoek, one of the lady that was in the property that I wanted to rent said she's moving out of the complex because there are too many kids that there are too many tenants in that apartments into that complex that have kids, and when she drives in, she must always drive in very slow. You must check that there's no bike in the driveway, etc. So all those factors really influence what people are going to look at when they're going to rent. So look if you are buying for residential purposes or you are buying for investment purposes, and look at various considerations before committing to buy that property. So these are my top 3 things that I would do if I was house hunting in 2024. What are you currently looking at if you're house hunting or if you're house hunting in 2024? Let us engage in the comment section below, and don't forget to share this video with friends and family to help us grow this awesome community. And it's goodbye.